That night was the strangest night of my life. When I set out on the journey, I could never have guessed what I was about to experience. The day had started off quite ordinary. I rushed through breakfast and hit the road with Ryan to attend a meeting. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The weather was warm but not overwhelming. The shadows cast by the trees along the roadside made the trip a bit more bearable. Ryan, as usual, was quiet. My son wasn't an outgoing kid, but he had a way of always being there for me. Even in my toughest moments, his maturity constantly surprised and filled me with pride. Things started to change midway through the journey. As the sun began to set, the warmth in the air was replaced by a strange chill. Dark clouds began to gather on the horizon, and before long a light drizzle started. The road turned slippery, and soon darkness wrapped itself around us. Night had fallen, and we were still far from home. Everything seemed to go wrong at once. When the car's tire went flat on that narrow and deserted road, I completely lost track of time. Our phones were almost dead, and we had no idea where the nearest help might be. Ryan calmly checked the tire, but when we realized there was nothing we could do, we both climbed back into the car, feeling helpless at that moment. We had to decide staying on the road any longer was risky, and every passing minute made things worse. Our only option was to find the nearest motel. We got back in the car and started driving slowly. The road was narrow and winding, and the rain had picked up, pounding relentlessly against the windshield. I could barely keep my eyes open from exhaustion, and I could tell Ryan was struggling to stay focused at the wheel. When we finally saw a sign, we both breathed a sigh of relief. It read Riverstone Motel. 2 miles. The paint on the sign was peeling and it was barely readable, but it didn't dampen our spirits. When we arrived at the motel, it looked old and run down from the outside. Soaking wet and exhausted, we stepped out of the car. The area was eerily quiet. There were no lights, no other cars, just a few yellow glows seeping out from the upper windows of the building, hinting that the place was still open. When we walked in, an old man behind the reception desk greeted us in a flat, monotone voice. "There's only one room left if you want it. The key's right here." In that moment, we knew we didn't have any other choice. We were tired, sleep-deprived, and just needed a safe place to rest. Ryan looked at me with a hint of concern in his eyes, but nodded in agreement when I made the decision. Without hesitation, we took the room. After taking the key, we walked down the hallway toward our room. The wooden floorboards creaked under each step, and the faded, peeling wallpaper on the walls made it clear that this place had been neglected for a long time. A faint smell of dampness hit my nose. For a brief moment, I thought about turning back, but we didn't have another choice. Ryan walked silently beside me, but I could see a slight discomfort on his face. When we entered the room, I was met with a sight that was better than I had expected. Yes, the room was small, but it looked clean aside from an old-fashioned bed, a small nightstand next to it, and a simple chair in the corner. There wasn't much else in the room. A small TV mounted on the wall seemed like it wouldn't offer much, beyond a few local channels. But at that moment, having a comfortable bed was more than enough. Ryan took off his damp jacket and hung it over the chair. I set my bag down, sat on the edge of the bed, and took off my shoes. My feet ached, and the fatigue of the entire day weighed heavily on my back. A brief silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the window. "Mom, I think I should grab some snacks." I saw a small vending machine near the reception. Ryan said, standing up and looking at me. His thoughtfulness always warmed my heart. I smiled and said, "Sure. Go ahead and grab something. I'll rest here for a bit." After Ryan left, I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I reflected on the night. I couldn't believe how such a simple journey had turned into such a complicated ordeal. Deep down, I had a feeling that something would happen that would make this night unforgettable. Ryan came back shortly after, carrying a few snacks and drinks. "You'll feel better soon, Mom," he said as he sat beside me. His maturity always amazed and impressed me, but that night, something happened between us that I could never have anticipated. Ryan sat on the chair next to me and opened a bag of chips. We quietly snacked for a while, and a sense of calm settled over the room. Yet at the same time, I felt an inexplicable unease in the pit of my stomach. The rain had grown heavier, and when I glanced out the window, I noticed the occasional flash of lightning, accompanying the dark night. At that moment, Ryan turned to me and began speaking in a calm voice. Mom, today's trip really got me thinking, isn't it strange how little control we actually have over life? Hearing such a thoughtful remark from him caught me off guard. But I agreed with him. Yes, Ryan. Life takes us to unexpected places. But what matters is how we deal with those challenges. We sat in silence for a while. After that, our conversation seemed to hang in the air as a quiet stillness enveloped the room. Once again, Ryan got up from his chair and walked over to the window, watching the rain as it streaked down the glass. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the right words to start. I was just about to ask him what was on his mind, when he suddenly turned to me and looked straight into my eyes. Mom, I need to confess something to you. He said, his voice was trembling, but I could feel his determination. For a moment, I wondered what he was about to say. My heart started racing. What is it, Ryan? Why are you so tense? I asked. Ryan took a deep breath. I don't want you to misunderstand me, but lately I've been seeing how lonely you seem. It's been a long time since Dad left, and you've been trying so hard to hold everything together, but I feel like something that truly makes you happy is missing. His words caught me off guard and made me emotional. Seeing myself this way through his eyes made me realize that something was indeed missing, but at the same time, it saddened me to know that my son, at such a young age, was thinking about these things. Ryan, you are my greatest joy. Yes, life can be hard, but we always find a way to deal with it. Having you with me means everything. Ryan avoided my gaze and lowered his head. It seems like there was something else he wanted to say, but he was hesitant to bring it up. I just want to do whatever I can to make you happy, he said softly. After hearing those words, I felt both curious and uneasy. I had a feeling there was something deeper he wanted to express. As I tried to figure out what he meant, the night went on, and the sound of rain provided a melodic backdrop around us. There was a different energy in the room that night. Ryan's thoughtful glances made me feel like a long, forgotten emptiness was being filled. He was my son, yes, but tonight, there was an unspoken bond between us that was hard to describe. Ryan walked over to the bed next to me and sat down in silence. We sat side by side listening to the rhythm of the rain outside. In that moment, I felt a closeness we hadn't shared in a long time. Mom, seeing you happy makes me happier than anything else, he murmured when he looked into my eyes. I felt a warmth I hadn't noticed before. Despite him always being by my side, he placed his hand on my shoulder after Dad left us. You've always been strong, but being strong has its cost, doesn't it? He whispered. His words moved me deeply. I placed my hand over his and held it tightly. Ryan, you are the most precious part of my life. But you're right. Sometimes pretending to be strong can be exhausting. The silence between us spoke more than words ever could. As Ryan gently squeezed my hand and looked into my eyes, he said, "Never misunderstand me, Mom. It just hurts to see you so lonely." His words brought long-buried emotions to the surface. In that moment, I felt once again how special and deep the bond between us truly was. I leaned toward Ryan and softly ran my fingers through his hair. I've always been proud to know you and to have a son like you, I said. The expression on Ryan's face showed both gratitude and a sense of relief. That night was a moment when the love and trust between a mother and her son grew even stronger. I hugged him, savoring the warmth of the connection we shared. What Ryan said had unearthed feelings I'd kept hidden for so long, as the sound of rain echoed softly in the background. The warmth of the bond I felt with him made everything seem more meaningful. While Ryan thought he was giving me strength, I realized he too carried his own burdens. "Ryan," I murmured, "life sometimes takes us to unexpected places. But having you by my side means so much to me." Ryan straightened slightly and looked at me. "Mom, you've always been a hero to me. But I feel like it's time for you to start thinking about yourself too." His words were both touching and thought-provoking. After years of weariness, I found myself questioning what I had truly done for myself. This moment was one of those rare and meaningful times that could only be shared between a mother and her son. I held Ryan's hand tightly in mine. "I'm so lucky to have a son like you," I said. With those words, a sense of peace and calm filled the room. Ryan smiled at me and said, "Come on, you should rest now. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." At that moment, I felt a sense of relief, both mentally and emotionally. Throughout the night, as the rain's melody continued, I prepared to drift off, savoring the peace I felt within. The night had deepened and the rain sound grew gentler. As I lay in bed, I could hear Ryan's steady breathing. Seeing him so calm and peaceful brought a strange happiness to my heart after such a long and exhausting day. My body was ready for sleep, but my mind lingered on the events of the evening. Ryan's words stayed with me for years. I tried to appear strong as a single mother, sacrificing so much along the way. My life revolved around Ryan, and his love for me had been the strongest bond keeping me upright. As I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, Ryan suddenly shifted in his sleep. He turned and his arm lightly brushed against my shoulder. The small touch startled me for a moment. But then I was overwhelmed by a mother's pure love for her child. I smiled to myself, thinking he's grown so much. I remembered the little movements he used to make as a child. When he slept, how he'd reach out his tiny arms to hug me. Now here he was, a grown and mature young man by my side. This moment reminded me once again how deep the love and bond between us was. That night, I looked at him and gently stroked his hair. "I'll always protect you, Ryan," I murmured. Throughout the night, I fell asleep with the comfort of this warm connection. As the first light of morning filled the room, I slowly opened my eyes. I must have been so tired, because I didn't wake up once during the night. Ryan was still lying next to me in a deep sleep. I looked at the peaceful expression on his face. Seeing him so calm filled me with a strange mix of happiness and sadness. How quickly the years had flown by. The little boy who used to fit in my arms was now a strong and thoughtful young man. The thoughts that had been swirling in my mind all night became even clearer with the calmness of the morning. I realized how little time I had been giving to myself. I had devoted my entire life to Ryan's happiness and his future. I had no regrets. I was proud of him. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the emptiness I felt inside. Ryan moved slightly in his sleep and murmured without opening his eyes, "Mom, are you okay?" His thoughtfulness made me both proud and emotional. "I'm fine, Ryan. Being with you always makes me feel good," I said with a soft smile. He smiled too, but continued sleeping without opening his eyes. I got up and looked out of the small window in the room. The rain had stopped and the air had cleared. The tranquility following last night's storm felt like a message to my life as well. Maybe it was time to leave behind the challenges of the past and do something for myself. Ryan woke up shortly after and stretched. "Mom, our talks last night really helped me. I've missed spending time with you like this." He said his words made me happy and thoughtful at the same time. We left the hotel to have breakfast. Sitting in a small, cozy cafe, we enjoyed coffee and warm croissants. As Ryan began sharing memories from his childhood, the fact that he remembered so much about those days surprised me. "Mom, do you remember one day I fell while playing at the park? And you cheered me up by getting me ice cream?" he said, laughing. Seeing him so happy made me forget everything else. For that moment, the bond I had with Ryan was deeper than just a mother. Son relationship, his love and support were the greatest treasures of my life. After leaving the cafe, we headed home. Along the way, I kept feeling the weight of last night's conversations and emotions. This journey was not just an internal reflection for me, but also a turning point for my relationship with Ryan. As we kept talking while driving, I realized just how much had changed. We had deep conversations, and I could tell that life was heading in a completely different direction. With each passing day, things were evolving, and I believed we could face this change together. Strong and ready, we arrived home. Ryan dropped his bag inside and immediately turned on the TV. I headed to the kitchen to start preparing dinner, but there was a feeling of unease inside me. The thoughts running through my mind wouldn't leave. Sometimes seeing the opportunities life gives us, and waiting for the right time can be so challenging. I heard Ryan watching something, but my mind was elsewhere. In that moment, seeing him grow reminded me of so much more than just motherhood. While I was instinctively trying to protect him, I also knew it was time for me to make more space in my own life. When dinner was ready, Ryan sat down at the table and we ate together. He was quiet during dinner, but his eyes spoke volumes, telling me there was so much he wanted to say. "Mom," he said after a while, "this evening is important for us. I want to tell you how much everything you do means to me." Tears filled my eyes, those simple but meaningful words reminded me again of how much Ryan had matured. Every moment spent with him reminded me of just how precious life really is. "I love you too, Ryan. Above all, being able to share every moment with you is my greatest reward." After dinner, we sat together and talked about the past. No matter how quickly time passed or how strong our bond was, I knew that at some point everything would change. We spent that night celebrating every moment I had with Ryan. We had dreams and goals for the future. Maybe by making more space for each other, we would carve a different path in life. And that night, perhaps it was time for a new beginning. To shed the burdens of the past and take a step forward for myself. Maybe in the future, I would continue my journey as a different and stronger woman. With Ryan's support, I knew I could handle anything. We ended the night silently, wrapped in each other's arms. Sometimes words weren't necessary. Being together was everything.